Welcome. It has just gone 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Tuesday the 19th of December, and you are watching Regional Wrap, episode 105. Regional Wrap, providing an insight on the issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode, crocodiles, people. Who is the problem? Is Matt Cornish. Matt is a wildlife guide, nature photographer and conservation advocate based in far north Queensland. Over the past 14 years living in Cairns and the Tablelands areas, Matt's career started as a zookeeper before moving into the state law enforcement in Cairns, Port Douglas and the remote Cape York communities. After a 7-year career with the Queensland Police Service, he shifted his focus back to nature, working as a wildlife tour guide throughout the wet tropics World Heritage Area and other stunning locations throughout Australia. Over the past 10 years, Matt has always joined his wife in business, running a wildlife education company, Zoo to You, which focuses on the delivering of wildlife-related education to children and adults throughout far north Queensland. In 2023, Matt co-founded an organisation called CROC, Community Representation of Crocodiles, an organisation aimed at protecting both people and crocodiles in the far north. This is done by providing factual presentations of the species in the media, advocating for legislative changes at a state level, increasing community education and collaboration with scientific research projects. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate that detailed intro as well.
It's good to have you here. If you could give us a bit about your background, because in regards to maybe your misadventures as a young person, seeing you're stuck with nature rather than sort of going to the big concrete cities and that. So was your upbringing a bit of an influence on your direction?
Yeah, I think everyone's upbringing is the rocket fuel for the propulsion of life. I actually grew up in New South Wales, believe it or not, and a lot of people would hold that against me here in North Queensland. But yeah, I did my schooling and my younger years on acreage in the Central Coast of New South Wales. And during my schooling years, I was actually talked into going and doing work experience at a local zoo by my career advisor. So I actually attended the Australian Reptile Park with not really a great deal of interest in wildlife, but after a couple of weeks of doing that, I most certainly gained an inquisitive nature towards all things scales and tails, so lots of reptiles. And after that, I decided that I was going to study zookeeping when I left school and then head far north Queensland. So I moved up here when I was 18 years of age and secured a job as a reptile keeper at one of the local zoos in Cairns, working with crocodiles and venomous snakes. And the rest is history, really. Worked in a few different zoos throughout far north Queensland: Cairns Tropical Zoo, Hartley's Crocodile Ventures, Cairns Night Zoo, and obviously moved into the tour guiding, law enforcement, wildlife education journey over the following years.
So I suppose was police work a bit out of your comfort zone in regards to the nature setting, or was there just as many beasts out there?
Yeah, most certainly. I'll be honest in the fact that I actually took up policing purely for financial reasons. A lot of kids grow up saying they want to be a policeman. That definitely wasn't me. However, when I was a zookeeper back in the day, the wage was so poor you could struggle to pay rent, not to mention travel the world and experience great things. So I decided to move into a government-related job where it was still interesting, no doubt, and earn some decent money, so I was able to travel the world. And from that career, I managed to explore Africa, South America, Asia, and travel all over Australia. So it was a brilliant opportunity to expand my horizons in the international front, but obviously something that is very confronting. And I take my hat off to any police officer still out there serving or who has served in previous years.
In regards to the photographic work, is that a lucrative side, or just a bit of a side interest, or are you getting a reasonable amount of attention to your photography because of the areas you go into, rather than just the general run of the mill, take a picture of a bird in a tree?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's actually definitely not lucrative whatsoever. I think if I wanted to move into the lucrative side of things, I would have to deal with bridezillas and groomsmen, because the wedding photography is definitely where the money's at, but it's also dealing with people in a very, very stressful situation. So I deal with animals because, well, the guy behind me can't really complain too much, and they're pretty beautiful company in the natural setting. So yeah, I photograph wildlife. It's most certainly not lucrative. But I actually work as a wildlife tour guide and photography guide. So it allows me to obviously capture my subjects and also teach tourists to be able to do so as well.
In regards to Zoo to You,
Mm.
who was that? Your wife's initiative, and then it's a joint partnership type thing. And how much role do you play in delivering those services?
Yeah, most certainly. My wife started it well before she even knew I existed. She actually started it, well, coming up to 17 years ago now. My wife is a qualified biologist and teacher. And coming from a captive animal care background, she decided to move into the educational realm and teach the younger generations about the importance of nature and wildlife. So she started it well before I came about. And obviously, when we met each other, we moved into business together as we became married. And now I've been working with my wife and Suti for the past 10 years. During that journey, I've been delivering wildlife shows all over far north Queensland, and obviously internationally as well, through similar technology to what we have today.
Is it easier to entertain children than keep the attention of adults?
That's a really good question. I think my favourite clientele to conduct shows to is actually nursing homes. I really enjoy chatting to the older folk. They obviously appreciate the small things in life because they don't really have too much going on in their life.
A
So being able
captive
to go in and have,
audience.
yeah, exactly. Being able to go in and have great chats with them is very, very rewarding. But also, I think when you educate some children, and then, you know, being fortunate enough to have been doing it for 10 years, we're starting to see those kids and their kids. So, you know, I've taught kids maybe in year 11 and 12, and then a few years later, I see them with their child at daycare. So it's pretty rewarding seeing multi-generations moving through.
Oh, well, if we'd like to move on to the subject at hand, can you give us a bit of a breakdown on Croc and why it started, when it started, and who's
Mm.
involved in it, and what services are you delivering in regards to Croc?
Yeah, most certainly. CROC obviously stands for the community representation of crocodiles, as you highlighted earlier. Obviously, we had to come up with a name that spelled croc, so it sort of naturally came to be. Look, honestly, croc is probably a knee-jerk reaction, most certainly. It's been something that's been brewing for the past 10 years. I did similar advocacy work in 2013 when the state government planned on doing a bulk removal of crocodiles throughout far north Queensland coastal habitat. I actually stood up and took on the current government at the time, who was our local member in Cairns, was forgetting the name of the local Cairns member.
You go to Trout and King if you.
Trout was, yes, King. That's who. Gavin King and Michael Trout. So Michael Trout was the local Baron member, and Gavin King was Cairns. And we had to really raise some awareness about the importance of these animals in their natural setting, because most people were just seeing them as a pest and a hindrance to their recreational activities. So we started a bit of advocacy back then, but as my career developed through policing, I took a backseat. In recent times, I've been thinking about doing a little bit of advocacy work as different political climates have been coming to be. But a real event that took place earlier this year triggered that knee-jerk reaction and made us step up and be on the front foot. And that was an incident that occurred in February this year at the Bloomfield River in far north Queensland. If your viewers aren't familiar with the Bloomfield River, you're probably looking at about 2 hours north of the Daintree National Park in a small community called Wujal. Now, this is remote far north Queensland. This is the wild environment. There are crocodiles in the Bloomfield River, and there have been for millions and millions of years. And on this particular day, the 22nd of February, a gentleman actually took himself down to the boat ramp at the Bloomfield River. He undressed himself down to his budgie smugglers, and he took his dog down into the water. What's most puzzling of this incident is the fact that he set up a camera and filmed himself do this. As soon as he entered the water, he was approximately knee deep, and a 4-meter crocodile lunged out of the water, struck the man, injuring his leg, grabbed the dog and killed it. The crocodile ate the dog, injured the man, And obviously this was an incident which occurred from the behaviour of the man. He walked past a crocodile warning sign, he ignored advice from locals, and he undertook what can only be described as an absolutely idiotic behaviour. Now, the flow-on effect from that particular incident is what really sparked my interest, and that was the government went out there, shot a crocodile, which was around 4.2 metres, and left it on country for the locals to bury. Now, the removal of an apex predator from an environment has environmental implications, of course, but it also has safety implications because you're encouraging younger male crocodiles to come into that habitat, which we could go into a little bit later. My biggest gripe with this whole incident was the repercussions of that man, and that was nothing. There was actually no repercussions whatsoever. I made a complaint to the RSPCA and the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries regarding a potential animal cruelty case, and they said, no, he hasn't committed any offences. So I questioned them as to walking your dog down to a well-known crocodile habitat and essentially feeding your pet to a crocodile. Wouldn't that constitute reckless pet ownership? And they've said, no, absolutely not. So we had a talk to the Department of Environment and Science and asked the same questions. And they said this man has not really committed any offences. So we're of the awareness that maybe there's a bit of a loophole in the legislation. Maybe there's something that needs to be looked at.
Well, that case does seem to suggest that he was providing a bit of bait. Because if you deliberately set up a camera, there's crocodiles there, you're trying to create a situation for YouTube or whatever. And I think social media has a lot to answer for reckless behaviour, not just this type of reckless behaviour, but all sorts of antics from jumping off buildings or trying to skateboard down handrails or something like that. And that's probably a start of a lot of recklessness.
Yeah, most certainly. And this gentleman actually sold the footage online and made several thousands of dollars from this particular incident. And there was no accountability. You've got the death of his pet dog, which is tragic enough. And you've also got the euthanasia of an animal, which is probably around 70 to 80 years of age. And the locals actually saw as a totem to that community. And again, no repercussions. So we actually looked at the legislation and, well, they did. Well, they got the crocodile that had the dog in its stomach anyway. So it could be, look, there has been particular circumstances out there that I am aware of where they have shot the wrong crocodile and gone about shooting multiple crocodiles in a hope that maybe that saturation effect is taking out the right animal. But, crocodiles don't gain a taste for human blood. They have it anyway. These are an apex predator. They don't learn from this particular incident and think, oh, I might be able to eat more people now, or I might be able to eat more dogs. It's essentially, if the food comes to them, they're going to take the opportunity. And in this particular case, that's exactly what happened.
Well, in my preview to, or the promotional notice for the show, I pointed out that human brains are 150 times the size of crocodiles' brains, but sometimes you worry about with that belies the common sense of people sometimes.
Yeah, most certainly. I guess when we look at the size of a brain, we certainly shouldn't correlate that with intelligence. And then we can see that if we look hard enough at society. And I've experienced that over many years of policing, that even if someone does have quite a large brain in their skull, it doesn't mean that they're going to be intelligent. I guess the thing with crocodiles is they're a truly well-evolved apex predator. If we go back in time, fossil records from almost 100 million years ago, the animal looks almost identical. So it hasn't really changed. And, you're looking at a mass extinction event of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. And crocodiles were still around. That didn't even bother them. So they are the ultimate survivor. And they've got to that way for a reason, because they're very, very well evolved. Yeah, well, they're very, very well evolved. You look at the little guy behind me. Some people might think he's a little cute, scaly guy, but just his body alone is loaded with physical adaptations. He's even just on his jawline, he's got tiny little dots called intergummentary sensory organs, and he can pick up vibrations from an animal walking on land while he's swimming past. So he can actually feel a land-based animal walking along while he's swimming past. It's pretty mind-blowing, and that is just one of hundreds of examples of why these animals are so perfectly evolved for that habitat.
Well, and the thing is, I suppose over the time we've entered their habitat, and that's changed the dynamics a fair bit. And if you sort of go back to, early colonial days when we first started settling up these areas, I mean, if you go back to the 1860s, 70s, and 80s, there's a number of recorded incidents of fatalities and that with crocodiles from all the way from West Australia. Broome featured largely in the 1800s and early 1900s, as did Barron River. Actually, Barron River was, I think, in the between 1880 and about 1890 and 1920. I think there were 7 fatalities in the Barron. Mulgrave River was another common place for fatalities. Down the Burdekin, even down Maryborough, and there was even a fatality in the Logan River. Now, that sort of twigged my interest, and I think that was in the 1920s, which is still fairly late, considering the population that would have been around Brisbane area and Moreton Bay from 1824, when Brisbane was first founded as a penal colony. So it was amazing it survived there that long, but it has been an encounter between people and crocodiles for obviously before us, but the indigenous people would have been encountering them all the time. And by the way, they're not immune to getting caught either. It's not as though it's just someone who's not familiar with the area. It's in a lot of cases, it's been indigenous people who have been caught by crocodiles as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a few things I'd like to say there. Number one, I'd love to know the statistics of how many people died of tetanus back then as well. No doubt there was plenty of things knocking their socks clean off them in the early European settlement days. I mean, Cairns and Port Douglas were originated as gold rush towns in the 1800s. Obviously moved into tin mining and logging, and now obviously urban sprawls turned it into a tourism destination. I guess what's really important about the crocodile population is, after World War II in the 1940s, we hunted them to near extinction all the way up until the 1970s. So in that period, we wiped out approximately 95% of crocodiles in Australia, which is pretty mind-blowing when you consider how many of these animals would have been killed for their skins and meat. Obviously, the skins are sent overseas to places like Italy, where they're tanned and turned into luxury items. Now, during that period as well, I believe the baby boom period went all the way up until the 1960s. So you've got huge urban sprawl, you've got massive population growth. At the same time, we've got almost extinction of saltwater crocodiles in Australia. So you've almost got a huge influx of people and a massive decrease in crocodiles. In the 1970s, when crocodiles are protected, you've got a lot of people living in far north Queensland undertaking recreational marine activities, water skiing in the Daintree River. You used to take your kids down to the Cairns mud flats and let them roll around in mud on the weekend for fun. It's crazy what we used to do for recreational activities. But these days, I like to think that we can probably do it in a little bit more of a sensible manner. If you want to be a world champion water skier, 100% do it down the Daintree River, because you'll never fall off. But these days, I imagine if you went water skiing down the Daintree River, if you did fall off, you're probably going to be in a little bit of trouble. So we do need to separate, obviously, our natural assets from recreational areas as well. And it's pretty simple. I mean, with a small amount of education, people can be croc-wise in croc country. I'm not asking people not to go to the cinemas. I'm not asking people to avoid the shopping centres. I'm simply saying you just need to be a little bit careful around waterways in far north Queensland.
I suppose the big difference is, when you think about the 1800s, early 20th century, we're pretty slow at penetrating the far north. I mean, it was a slow settled area, and even to remote Western Australia like Broome and Kimberley's and that wasn't. I think it only sort of really got going once they found iron ore there. And same with the Darwin, it wasn't exactly a tourist attraction in those days, but it certainly did bring out some of the big guns sort of thing for people who sort of decided to have a go at crocodiles, because they weren't protected, like you say, until 1970. I think it started in about 72 in various states, and it was finally fully implemented by 74, and with federal oversight sort of thing. So what is the protection for crocodiles now? Who's the major authorities? Does it rest with the Commonwealth, or it rest with the state?
Yeah, well, I guess in different states they have different legislation, and in Queensland it comes under the Department of Environment and Science, is the governing body that oversees it. And you're looking at the Nature Conservation Act is the main piece of legislation that protects native animals. Crocodiles in Queensland are listed as vulnerable. However, they are listed as least concern on a national level. And the reason being is, I'm just going to point your viewers to that little sneaky map you've got next to you there, Bill. And we've obviously got the east coast of Queensland. We have a thing called the Great Dividing Range, which goes all the way from Cooktown down to Victoria, turns left and goes up into the highlands. Crocodiles can only live on the east coast of those mountains all the way down to the waterway. And if we go all the way up to the Daintree, Cape Tribulation, those mountains come down to the beach. So it's quite a narrow corridor where crocodiles can live in far north Queensland. However, if you obviously get over Cooktown, it's open floodplains in Cape York. There's a lot of open areas where they can go. Moving through the Gulf into the Northern Territory, a lot of floodplains as well. The Northern Territory population cannot be utilised when it comes to the conversation of Queensland crocodiles, because it's completely different, obviously, geological layout. There's no mountains as such that would restrict the movement of crocodiles. And as such, the population is very different over there. The management of crocodiles in Northern Territory is something that I don't fully comprehend. I study the ones in Queensland. So I'm not going to dive into how Northern Territory manage their population. I don't live there. And yeah, well, I mean, they have a very, very different mentality over there, but they also have a really, really good educational system over there, which is excellent. Over here, I think it is lacking. A classic story that I like to tell people in 2013, the state government recognised that they did need to bolster their crocodile education campaign in North Queensland. And they put a lot of money into marketing, how to be croc wise in croc country. And if you go to the Cairns airport, there's actually big bollards and big signs that go over the road in. Okay, and usually it's welcome to far north Queensland, welcome to tropical paradise. And one of them had a picture of a crocodile and said, "You are entering crocodile country, be croc wise in croc country." Excellent. Except the problem was it was on the wrong side. So it actually had people going to the airport in Cairns when they're leaving their holiday. So just exactly, you arrive in Cairns, you should be privy to that information, not when you're leaving saying, "Oh, geez, I'm lucky I knew that beforehand." So yeah, I think there's a lot of little educational things that we really need to focus on. And that's obviously one of the fundamentals of croc.
Well, maybe instead of welcome to country, we should be put the warning as the plane comes in. You're now entering Cairns. You're entering crocodile space. Be prepared to give ground.
Yeah, you know what? It'd be amazing if you landed in far north Queensland and they walked around the airplane, handed out a brochure to every person that arrived, and it had basic safety implementation. If it's the wet season, hand out a box jellyfish brochure. There's a lot of things out there that can hurt you, but if you're smart, you're fine. We manage ourselves around box jellyfish in the wet season. We wear stinger suits. We have stinger nets. We just need to be a little bit smarter when it comes to obviously involving ourselves with saltwater crocodiles.
Do you think it's also, I mean, I'll do a screenshot now and just see what the critters were like some time back. Andrew, you haven't got hosting available. Oh well.
Just try again, Bill.
Thank you. This is back in 1949. This is supposedly probably the largest crocodile shot in Australia at 8.6 meters. And this lady, she was a Polish immigrant, and she's credited with taking out at least 15,000 crocodiles herself, which is a fairly awesome task. And gee, that's a lot of ammunition.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to go back to that photo, Bill, it'd be great to highlight a couple of little things. I mean, if there's any fishermen watching, there's something to learn from this image. It's called forced perspective. There's nothing like standing a few meters back from the crocodile to make it look bigger. Not to mention the amount of bloating and rounded edges on that crocodile. It's probably been dead for about 3 days. Look, it's interesting because there's actually no proof that that crocodile did exist. That was 8.6 meters. It's probably more of a legend. I don't think that animal was ever verified. The skull was never actually retained by scientists. There was actually no photos that truly put it to scale. All you got to do is look at the two people crouching down behind a crocodile, probably about 6 meters back. And then just to the left, you've got another lady who looks like a giant in comparison.
Oh, so, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, forced perspective in that image, I think, is probably making it look a little bit bigger than it was. But it's also interesting to note that Christina Pulowski actually turned conservationist after this alleged shooting as well. And she was one of the biggest campaigners to make sure that crocodiles were protected into the future, because she actually became aware that what she's doing is actually causing quite an upset in the environment.
The other thing, but from that era, we also got maybe a false sense of security, because we got to the situation where the numbers have been so depleted that you could go and swim in the Barron, you could swim in the Mulgrave, and you probably could have a reasonable chance on the Daintree back in the 50s, even through the 60s, and obviously they weren't protected to the 70s. So that situation became commonplace for more than a generation. And now we have to deal with the situation where it's changed, and we're now finding the crocodiles reintroducing themselves into a lot of these waterways. Is there a way to get a balance between us enjoying some of the things that were enjoyed by previous generations, like down on the Mulgrave River, having no fear to go to Ross and Lock area, and all those sort of things? And what sort of bounce can we get?
Yeah, most certainly, Bill. First of all, I'll let your viewers know I'm certainly not running around hugging trees. People might see me as a bit of an extremist when it comes to conservation initiatives, particularly involving crocodiles. But look, I've seen both sides of the fence. I'm no stranger to crocodile country here in far north Queensland, and I am all about balance and equilibrium within our environment. We are the most intelligent species on Earth, allegedly. So I think it's about time we look outside the square and see if our intelligence and the development of technology may be able to assist us in this. I am aware that the Department of Environment Science, with a little bit of pressure, has actually dedicated funding to additional programs that don't involve a long barrel and a bullet. And perhaps there's things like maybe detection devices that may be installed in certain areas. Just purely hypothetical here, Bill, maybe we could reclaim Lake Placid as a swimming location. Maybe we could set up a beam at the entry to Lake Placid, whereby if any animal swims through there, the sonar beam actually detects the animal as a crocodile, and then the next frequency beam would actually deter the animal. This is the kind of technology that Department of Environment Science is currently looking at developing. If we can do that, we can stop animals going in there with almost a great level of certainty. And then the only other issue would be removing the animals that are currently in there. And I understand there is saltwater crocodiles in Lake Placid. There was a movie made about it, mind you. I wouldn't be going swimming in any lake called Lake Placid anyway. But yeah, once we do actually remove the animals that are in there, potentially we could look at ways of stemming the flow of movement of crocodiles into those kind of natural areas. Totally, life is all about a balance. And I think it's time that we use the intelligence that we have gathered over all of these years and put it to good use. The day of pointing a barrel at a crocodile and pulling a trigger, I think those days are over, and we need to look at alternatives to managing our natural assets, as well as allowing people to enjoy recreational marine activities.
Do you think there are some areas that we should have a priority of reclaiming, like say Lake Placid, Rosslyn Lock, not the full lower reaches of the Mulgrave, but there's definitely where it's definitely fresh water area, clean sort of swimming sort of area, and maybe some other locations as well?
Yeah, most certainly. Look, I think first is really important to highlight to your viewers that saltwater crocodiles, we probably should be calling them estuarine crocodiles, because they do live in fresh water as well. In fact, one attack that actually did occur at the Barron River many eons ago was the gentleman that put his head into the water to taste it to see if it was safe to swim, and he was bitten on the head. So it certainly can be very, very dangerous if you have that kind of mentality. But look, there certainly should be, in my opinion, there should be areas that we can look at that kind of technology being implemented. Ross and Loch, Lake Placid, most certainly these places could be potentially maybe a trial location for any upcoming technology developments. Look, putting satellite trackers on large male crocodiles, watching their movement. Since the passing of Steve Irwin in 2006, I think a lot of this crocodile research has fallen by the wayside. A lot of scientists haven't, necessarily had the funding or maybe the priority to be able to look at this kind of problems and find a solution. But definitely, if the government's willing to put money towards it, we might be able to find an equilibrium, a balance between humans and crocodiles, and coexistence can be achieved.
Do you also think maybe we should draw a line in the sand in regards to latitude south? Saying, all right, below such and such latitude south, well that we try to keep them north of that.
Because, yeah, most certainly.
Because let's talk about global warming. It's not that we've always had climate change. I don't want to go in that discussion. But if in this interglacial period it's going to get warmer, it's going to increase the probable habitats for crocodiles. So do you think there's a sort of southern limit that we may look at, both in Queensland and Western Australia? So to say, well, no further movement south, people, crocodiles.
Yeah, so you look at the potential increasing of temperatures. What year did you say that there was an attack in the Logan River?
That was supposedly 1920s odd.
Well, there you go. Yeah, crocodiles have been found all the way down the Logan River. Yeah. I think the Mary River, actually, they've been identified as well. Look, most certainly feel free to draw a line in the sand and say, yep, let's keep the Gold Coast safe. If we're having a look at an international level, a lot of people like holidaying in Bali. Crocodiles are moving into those areas in Bali where they were once, shot to almost extinction. So there's going to be these kind of conversations had not only in Australia, but internationally as well, of what is the balance between recreational activity and obviously the conservation of these animals. Absolutely, draw a line in the sand down wherever you need to around about the Rockhampton, Gladstone area, and then anything south of that is proactively removed. Unfortunately, crocodiles can't be relocated at the moment anyway. I mean, Steve Irwin and his crew actually did studies in 2005. The scientific paper was released in 2007, and it showed 3 crocodiles that were transported to different locations all around Cape York Peninsula. And one of the crocodiles actually traversed the waterways all the way around the Cape back to within a couple of 100 meters of where it was originally removed. So they do have the ability to geolocate and move around different territories and find where they were. But also there's ways of potentially maybe being able to move these animals and deterring that geolocation. So I don't have the answer to everything, but all I'm doing is I'm encouraging others to look outside the box.
In regards to other countries and that, do we have a reasonable policy as it is at the moment, or do other countries have better management? I mean, the United States, with their alligators, they are fairly proactive and actually have a season to take so many alligators out of the system. I presume it would be sort of a little bit hard to sort of enforce regulations in places like Papua New Guinea and the Philippines. I mean, the Philippines is so many islands in that, and obviously the government doesn't have the resources to sort of control every locale. So do you know if other countries have got a fair system or a better system than ours, or
well, firstly, I didn't even want to dive into the Northern Territory, so my knowledge of international crocodile management is pretty poor. However, through my experience, I remember traveling through the Kinabatangan River in Borneo in Malaysia, and it was time for the kids to have a wash. So the mother in the group had 4 kids lined up. She grabbed them by the wrists, dunked them into water, out, next. And I remember sitting there thinking, if she uses that same spot every single day, there is a fair chance the croc's going to be waiting, because they have estuarine crocodiles there as well. Look, in Papua New Guinea, I know a lot of these animals are protected. They're seen as as a financial benefit to the communities, to the villages. I think a lot of international areas, they'll actually harvest the eggs as well. But what's also important to remember is crocodiles manage their own numbers. If you've got a large dominant male, he's keeping younger, more feisty males out of the area. In North America, around the US, I mean, people get killed by vending machines, for God's sakes. But alligators actually kill primarily elderly people. These are people that maybe are playing golf and get knocked off their feet and hit their head. There's a lot of fatalities that are occurring to a different demographic than what our estuarine crocodiles are here in Australia. Traditionally in Australia, you're looking at younger males, probably between 20 and 50 years of age. And so I just called a 50-year-old young. And also they're undertaking, fishing activities or maybe snorkeling or scuba diving or just being an absolute fool for social media. There's a lot of different reasonings as to our demographic, obviously, but it is different to the US. Look, it's one of those things. Education probably goes a long way. If you look at India, approximately 10,000 people die each year from the Indian cobra. Imagine if we implemented safety boots, gaiters, and some education into India, you're probably saving, 9,000 people each year. So I think education does go a long way into mitigating the risk, opposed to the old-fashioned, 1800s point a gun and pull the trigger mentality.
Well, the other thing is too, it's not really overly profitable like it used to be before, because we've got crocodile farms, so we can get better material for handbags, because we're going to let them grow so big, and then we turn them into handbags. So there's not a lot of money to be made in getting crocodile skins from the wild.
Yeah, most certainly. There, obviously, crocodile farming was implemented as
We've just got a little bit of lag there with your
conservation tool as a byproduct of its implementation. Yeah, my apologies. It says it's a little bit unstable at the moment, but hopefully that clears up. Yeah, it's interesting. Crocodile farming was implemented, and these days it's probably seen as more of a conservation tool. Being able to provide a high quality skin to the international market, opposed to a damaged wild crocodile skin, has definitely made our wild animals invaluable when it comes to, obviously, the skin trade. But I see this as a great thing. I mean, we need to be having these animals in the wild. The importance of having an apex predator in an ecosystem cannot be understated. Now, these animals, they're obviously a huge pest control in North Queensland. They love to eat pigs. And also they slow down the spread of disease. Crocodiles, they prefer to eat slow, sick and injured animals because they're more vulnerable. And crocodiles will take that opportunity. So if you remove an apex predator over a waterway, you're potentially increasing the spread of disease. You're increasing the breeding of sick and injured animals. And evolution is only achieved through resistance. And our ecosystem needs to keep strong, needs to be stable. And apex predators are at the forefront of that stability and growth.
Yeah. Being an apex predator, what service do they actually provide? Because I've heard people talk about crocodiles and bull sharks, and there's a bit of I think bull sharks are probably one of the most dangerous creatures going around, because they seem to be fairly aggressive, and in our river systems, because they can come up so far out of the sea into the fresh water. What sort of balance does the crocodile provide to nature?
Well, I mean, anyone that understands anything about an apex predator, I mean, the most famous study ever conducted internationally was the wolves in the Yellowstone. They removed wolves because they were seen to be dangerous. And they realized
No, you're breaking up
through prey and predator animals reasonable. So these. Have you got me there, Bill?
Yeah, okay now. Yeah, sort of.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in Malanda, we don't have the greatest internet, so I do apologise.
Yeah, not a problem. The other thing is, south of the Daintree and that, and we've got a lot of crocodiles in the Johnstone River, and there's a lot of irrigated land and cane farmers and that working fairly close to the water line. Do you think there's a case for some sort of control in those sort of areas where, I mean, a cane farmer is fairly busy, he's doing something, whatever, his attention might not capture a predator around. So is there a balance there in regards to, well, where it's a work safe type situation, does there have to be a different view compared to sort of the normal thing where people are just having a leisure time at a local swimming hole or something like that?
Yeah, just thinking those cane farmers down at the Johnstone River, they would have a safe work implementation for coastal taipans, right? Because I mean, you've got the third most venomous snake and arguably the most dangerous snake in Australia in their cane fields. So I'd say there's probably a few other risk emission strategies they need to focus on, opposed to old mate crocodile here, who is really only causing one fatality in Australia every 2 years. You know, on average.
We're still losing you. It's a pity.
A few things that they should be looking at opposed to a crocodile.
With the numbers, I mean,
have you got me there, Bill?
Yeah, I've got you back now. You just
Beautiful.
freeze here and now and then. That's all.
Yeah, my apologies. I might just jump back into that one if you don't mind. I'm not sure how broken up it was, but I was simply highlighting that when it comes to the big scheme of risks for a cane farmer in Innisfail, I don't think a crocodile would even register in the top 100. You know, you've got the PPE for the actual harvesting equipment in themselves. You've got the third most venomous snake that loves to live in sugarcane in the coastal taipan. I don't think there would be ever a situation where a cane farmer would accidentally end up in a crocodile habitat and see that as a major risk moving forward. It's common sense. You stay away from the waterway where crocodiles live, not asking for too much. But obviously they should be probably more focused on the harvesting equipment and conducting their job safely.
Oh, I suppose there's other things because there's irrigation plants. You're not always sitting up in the harvester or those sort of things. So there's just opportunities, I suppose. But
yeah, absolutely.
With management, do you think maybe harvesting of eggs might be a bit of a possibility or something like that, just to sort of avoid those sort of explosions? Although I gather most crocs don't make it to anywhere near to maturity anyway.
Yeah, the thing is with egg harvesting, we have to look at only 1 out of 250 make it to be a 5-year-old crocodile. This is obviously an average based on a study in Australia. But with that, you say, where are they going? A lot of eggs are killed through flooding. So a crocodile egg actually breathes through the shell. So if you rotate the egg, the embryo will detach from the shell and drown. If you inundate the egg with water, it will drown and die. But if it does actually survive that nesting period and hatches, you're looking at barramundi, birds of prey, other crocodiles. These are all targeting baby crocodiles. In fact, they're a huge food source for a lot of other animals out there. So
I was just going to say, well, maybe the apex predator is also a good food source for lower ones down the chain. It's a little bit like turtles. They come on shore, they lay hundreds of eggs each, and then they nick off, and then they all the turtles, the young ones, after they hatch, they all make a go for the beach. But gee whiz, there's a lot of birds and bits and pieces that are taking them out before they make it to the water too.
And that's a really important ecological lesson we can learn, that these animals have got the saturation effect. They provide so many babies, but only the smartest and the strongest survive. And they're the animals that are going to pass on their genetics. So these animals are on the forefront of consistently improving their own, obviously, stability in the environment.
Well, that's probably something we've lost. These days, so many of us seem to survive regardless of the stupidity that we exercise, throughout our life, doing dangerous things. So,
well, Bill, I guess one of my favorite sayings is resistance creates evolution. Without resistance, you won't have evolution. And mankind these days, what's our resistance? You lose power for an hour and a half during a storm? Like, really? So we are not evolving physically whatsoever. We're evolving in our mental capacity to learn and develop technologies, but physically, most certainly not. We would have to be in a harsh landscape for a few thousand years to even see any form of physical change.
Well, the other thing is, you might think we're getting better mental abilities, but it's not sort of demonstrated in the actions of a lot of people, as you would well know with the police force.
Yeah, most certainly. Look, you're always going to have a certain demographic of our target audience that's going to exhibit stupid behaviour, and that's another reason that Croc exists. We're trying to raise awareness against people who are undertaking reckless activity in crocodile habitat for the purpose of social media gain. We have obviously we had that Bloomfield incident, but we've had so many others. One guy in Innisfail jumped on top of a crocodile from a jetty, and the deal was that a girl nearby would give her phone number to him if he jumped on the crocodile. The crocodile bit him on the arm and broke his arm, but he survived. Like, she better not be having these kids. I'm telling you right now, because the genetic makeup of that gentleman is pretty poor, I'd imagine. So it's things like that that we're really trying to focus our attention on. In fact, we're currently campaigning for the implementation of a legislation change, which would mean that it is illegal to recklessly interact with crocodile habitat. The term recklessly is obviously highly subjective and would be open to the court scrutiny, but it would be involving things like walking down to a boat ramp with your dog, past a crocodile warning sign, and filming yourself. That kind of stuff. These people need to be held accountable. This isn't an old lady with dementia that ends up in the Mowbray River and gets eaten by a crocodile, which we saw a few years back. This is a deliberate act which is done for the purpose of online, fame and glory. We need to hold these people accountable.
And most likely financial gain.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw just a news article this morning, believe it or not, where a gentleman was fined $2,300 because he took his pet python surfing. Why on earth would you take your pet python surfing? Like, it just doesn't make sense. You're exposing an animal to salt water, and what are you doing it for? So people think you're cool? Like, come on, mate. It's just mind-blowing.
But not only that, you basically giving a lot of people the irrits or freaking them out because they're not certain of what the ramifications of a python on the loose might do.
Oh,
He
it's an ego. It's an ego
might
trip.
think he knows he's got it under control and that, but there's other people less experienced than him that are sort of maybe a lot more apprehensive.
Oh, it's done nothing more than to boost his own ego. That is the only reason you could possibly justify that kind of action. And it's great that the government's given him a fine, but hopefully we can extend that to other idiots that seem to be appearing in the online space.
Well, yeah, part of the legislation should also be that they're not allowed to profit from that activity. So any monies they receive is confiscated and given to the state because the taxpayer needs as much relief as he can get.
Oh, most certainly. And I think if these people continue their online trends after the implementation of a fine, then we could be the richest state in Australia. Because there seems to be an absolutely growing population of these fools that seem to think that it's a great idea, when the environment's the one that's copying the punishment at the moment, whereas it should be the actual gentleman involved. As I mentioned earlier, apparently we're the most intelligent species, but we still can't manage how to do this. One part of the legislation proposal is the implementation of a circumstance of aggravation, which would involve the use of social media. So, there's one thing on leaving your fish scraps at a boat ramp, which would attract a crocodile, but it's another thing jumping into the water, spruiking about it and putting it online and encouraging others to do it as well.
Well, that's an interesting point there. What are the sort of guidelines for using boat ramps and taking care of your fish in regards to after you get them ashore? Is there a need to relook at some of those regulations and rules?
Yeah, definitely. I think the implementation of a legislation reform would encompass a lot of this, croc-wise behaviour or people that can't follow croc-wise behaviour. The government's been spruiking about their croc-wise behaviour for years now, and it includes staying 5 metres back from the water's edge in crocodile territory, disposing of fish scraps away from the boat ramp, so either out at sea or in the bin, Obviously, the smell of fish in the water would attract a crocodile. And also putting the boat between you and the water, or the trailer between you and the water when launching your boat. Maybe this is something that the government can look at, a safer way of designing boat ramps to ensure that people can launch their boats safely in crocodile territory. I don't want anyone to stop launching their boats in croc territory. I don't want anyone to stop, using these waterways safely. I think it's truly important as part of our lifestyle, and it's our culture here in far north Queensland as well. But maybe there's a barrier system in place that we can look at. Maybe there's these underwater sonar technologies we can look at. There has to be other ways of deterring crocodiles that don't involve, as I said, a barrel and a bullet.
Yeah, well, I've left for the reef a couple of times by boat from the Russell River down near Durrell. And that's sort of, well, the water's not very clear. Anything can be lurking there. And you really don't, I've seen people get out in the water and, realign their boats to get them on the trailer. And I'm thinking, gee whiz, that's a bit risky. But fortunately, I was a skipper who just whacked it. Someone had the car lined up on the shore, and he just whacked it straight onto the back of the trailer, and we didn't even get in the water, basically. So
yeah, well, that's it. A little bit of experience obviously has led that man to undertake that activity safely. So it's great.
Well, I would hope a lot of other people sort of take that line too, because I don't see the idea of putting your foot in water around the Russell and the Mulgrave River down at that sort of point, because it is so dark. You've got no visibility whatsoever.
And there is some extraordinary animals frequenting the Russell River. I think that's one of our beautiful habitats when it comes to estuarine crocodiles.
In regards to maybe ramping up education, I mean, we've got tours up in the Daintree sort of thing. I think there's a boat goes around a couple of the places and you see the crocodiles in the wild. They're bloody expensive to go on. They're really aimed at the tourists and that who are going to chuck away a fair bit of money. Do you think we need a more reasonable program, so just more school kids, more of the general public can go and get a bit of awareness rather than have these sort of high cost excursions?
Yeah, certainly. And I think education is one of the core principles of Croc when we did develop it. Look, one of the ideas that I'm looking at in the future, it's not something I've discussed in public yet, but it would involve an educational brochure that is given out to people who are arriving in Cairns, or locals, and attached would be a discount coupon. Yeah. And potentially this can be subsidised through the Crocwise program in the state government. So encouraging people to undertake these these crocodile tours, learn a little bit about them, safely experience the animals in their wild habitat, and obviously learn a little bit of respect and coexistence. I think it's excellent. Look, there's a lot of people out there doing great work in the education realm. I don't think the government subsidises it enough. I don't think the government has dedicated enough money to crocodile education. And, no doubt there is 1,000 different avenues to inject money to increase, the amazement of our state. But I definitely think crocodiles need to be a priority. A really positive sign to come out is, a little bit of backstory. I did have a meeting with the Queensland government probably a couple of months ago now, and we actually met with the environmental minister at the time, with Megan Scanlon, and we discussed the implementation of a potential legislation reform. In attendance was Bob Irwin, Steve Irwin's father. We had Amanda French, who is a very well-known conservationist from down south, and some other wildlife educators as well, including Mick Bender from Brisbane. We had this meeting and it was very positive. Megan Scanlon said she did want to inject a lot of money into, deterrent technology, education. The next day there was a cabinet reshuffle, and the new environmental minister is actually the previous youth justice minister. And I'm not going to dive into politics, but it doesn't take an overwhelming amount of qualifications to be a politician. And to have your portfolio dramatically changed overnight and make such huge financial decisions for the state is quite unusual. But needless to say, the new environmental minister has flagged recycling and crocodiles as her two big projects moving forward coming up to next year's state election.
I think there's a lot of other issues besides that, but just touching on there. I mean, I get the idea in regards to every inbound plane coming into Cairns. I think most people would find a 10-minute little doco played over their screen, highlighting welcome to Cairns. It's tropical north. We've got rainforest. We've got beautiful reef, but we also got a lot of dangers. And
100%.
And you need a bit of. I think that was probably be a bit of a winner and attention grabber. And if it was complemented by a brochure or something like that, I think it's crazy. Even for people who live in Cairns and flying back home and that, I mean, that they might get a bit tired of it after the 10th time if they're a frequent flyer, but it certainly doesn't help to. It certainly helps to reinforce the message anyway, especially with the people who are going to get out there and be in the locale.
Well, Bill, there's a couple of things there. Firstly, Jetstar, which is obviously probably the most frequent flyer into far north Queensland, they don't have screens at the back of each seat, so that would probably have to be a speech from the flight crew, along with the welcome to country that they have, or the acknowledgement of country. My apologies. Another thing would be obviously our international tourists. They have the screens on their TV. By all means, have this great presentation, have the brochures attached. And another thing I'd like to highlight is maybe with the particular circumstance that Qantas finds themselves in, this might be a good PR exercise for bolstering their profile.
Yeah, I mean, they have sort of let the ball drop over the last few years, and they have some challenges, and so this might be a good way to pick up the ball.
I'll be contacting their CEO after this call.
No worries. Look, we're just coming up to the hour mark. It's been a really, really interesting talk, and I know you've got to duck away. You've got other things to do. But if you'd just like to give a bit of a wrap up on Croc and what you're doing going forward.
Yeah, we've got some really interesting projects coming forward. As an organisation ourselves, we're obviously, as we discussed, promoting a lot of the educational realm. You know, myself, I'm a wildlife educator, so it's something I'm incredibly passionate about. I do feel sorry for the tourists that get on my tours every now and then, because I'm like, oh yeah, there's a tree, but let me tell you about crocodiles. And I'm talking about crocodiles.
No, they don't climb trees.
So it's I mean, they could probably about 200 million years ago, but anyway. And they were about 20 meters long. But needless to say, look, education is something I'm very passionate about. Some of the things we've talked about is something I'm going to be really pushing forward with Croc. Raising awareness through education is truly important. We believe education is the key to conservation, opposed to eradication. We're also looking at obviously applying more pressure to the government, particularly leading up to the next state election. I think this is going to be one that probably tests our current government more than ever before. So we're not only exercising caution and discussing these things with the current government, but also the opposition, and seeing if we can secure some policy frameworks down before the next election in case there is a changeover, which is appearing to be quite likely at this stage. And we're also working very, very closely with researchers. You know, we have some guys down south that I'm not going to talk about in great detail now, but they are looking at the implementation, a trial period for satellite tracking crocodiles, and looking at how we can use technology in a greater deal. So we're going to be supporting them where we can, whether it be through awareness, through fundraising, through funding, or even just promoting the work that they're doing and trying to bring it all into one nice little package. So we're standing up for these guys behind us, because I feel like there's a lot of people against them, and hopefully the tide will change in the next couple of years.
Well, best of luck with that. I know that, there's a lot of people who just want to re-secure the areas that they had before, and we'll have to sort of see how that conversation goes between the two parties in regards to reclaiming your childhood and dealing with things how they are at the moment.
I think the beautiful thing about mankind is the fact that we have the ability to communicate through our mouth. Having respectful conversations about things like this is what's really, really important. That's why I appreciate your time today, Bill. But it's about putting your ego aside, putting your beliefs aside, sitting down and just having a conversation. And this is what we're promoting amongst people. As I said, I am all for happy medium. I'm not saying let's save every single crocodile in Australia. I'm saying there needs to be a better way to be able to create coexistence between humans and this incredibly misunderstood animal behind me.
Well, I think we've got a challenge with the people listening to the show and people out there. I think they're ones who are causing a lot of the issues. But yeah, we will see how you go in the future, and all the best to you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And, if anyone is watching this show and wants to reach out a little bit more, by all means do so. You can reach us at crocqld.com. You can send us an email through the website if you like. You can find us on social media pages if you're that way inclined as well. Reach out. I'm always up for a discussion. Might be a little bit of a delayed response because we are pretty busy, but anytime, please reach out and we can hopefully communicate any concerns that you do have.
Okay, Matt, thanks very much for your time. If you just stay on the line, I'll just introduce next week's show and we'll have a quick chat.
Cheers.
If you enjoyed today's show, please like, share and subscribe to our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. Our next interview, I'll be speaking to an expert, Richard Goldacre, on the fishing laws that are coming in and the effects on our commercial fishermen and our stock primarily of Spanish mackerel and the use of gill nets. So join us again next week. Thank you.